Welcome back to the ClassyJS Devlogs. This is ClassyJS Devlog number 9. If you're new to ClassyJS or you'd like to follow along with the progress we're making, check out the previous devlogs linked in the description and click the subscribe button to be notified when new devlogs come out. If you'd like to download ClassyJS, the link is also in the description, or you can go to classyjs.com. In the last devlog, we created a setter that forces the incoming sound value to be lowercase and then checks to make sure it's either dog or cat sounds. This creates a problem because dogs can make cat sounds like meow, and cats can make dog sounds like bark. Let's improve this code through the mechanic of overriding. Overriding is when we have an existing method that we either need to completely change or add functionality to. We do this by writing the method in the subclass with the same name as the method in the superclass. This new method completely replaces the one that was being inherited from the superclass. But what do we do if we also need the functionality of the superclass's method? We'll dig into all this today. First, we need to figure out what we need to keep in the superclass and what we need to put in the subclasses. There are two ways to look at this. Firstly, we always want the superclass's method to work at its most basic level. Secondly, we need to keep the most important part of the method inside the superclass's setter and move what's less important or only used by the subclasses out to the subclasses. Looking at our example, we see that the pet's sound setter does three things. 1. It forces the incoming value to be lowercase. 2. It allows only specific values to be used. And 3. It stores the value. Let's start with making sure that the superclass's method still works at its most basic level. It needs to store the value into its private property. So we'll keep number 3, storing the value. Next, let's look at what else needs to stay and what should be moved to the subclasses. Number 1. Forcing the string to be lowercase. It's likely that this will be the case for all subclasses, but we don't know that. A subclass may not want lowercase, so we don't want to keep that in the superclass pets code. Let's comment it out. Number 2. Validating for dog and cat sounds is definitely something that doesn't belong in a superclass like pet. So let's comment this out as well. Okay, so our subclass pet now has a setter that still works by saving the value passed in and no longer does things it shouldn't do. Now we're ready to build our subclass methods. Let's go to the dog class and create the same setter by adding pub.set.sound equals function value and curly braces. By doing this, we've overridden the superclass's setter method. Now that the dog has its own definition for the sound setter method, it won't use the pet superclass's method anymore. If we run the code right now, it won't actually do anything because the dog class's version of the method has overridden or replaced the pet superclass's method, and the dog class's version of the method doesn't do anything. It's empty. Let's test this to make sure. First, we'll go back to the main class and comment out the old cat code, and then we'll test to see what happens when we run the code that's telling dog to roar when it greets us. Dog didn't roar, dog still barked. Dog setter didn't change dog sound to roar from its default bark. This is what we expected, because we know dog's overridden setter method is empty. To fix this, we can take a look at the pets class and bring over the functionality that we identified earlier as subclass specific. We can see this functionality easily because it's commented out. The two pieces are to force the sound value to be lowercase and to validate it's a dog sound. Let's pull these two pieces of commented functionality from the pet class to the dog class. We'll copy the to lowercase code and the validation code for dog sounds. Then we'll go to the dog class and we'll paste it into the dog's setter method. And finally, we'll uncomment it so it's functional again. At this point, the dog setter is performing actions on the value brought in, but it's not storing the value passed in. To do that, we'd need access to pet's _sound property. Since it's private to the pet class, the dog class can't access it. We'll need to find another way. We know that the pet class has access to it, and it already stores a value via its sound setter. With this in mind, the dog class can call the pet's sound setter method to store the _sound value. To call the pet's sound setter, we add superclass.sound equals value. Next, let's go back to main and set our dog's greeting to one of the approved greetings. Woof. And let's test again. Boom! This is exactly what we expected. The dog setter is forcing the string to be lowercase, validating it, and then using the superclass's setter to store the value. Now that we've updated dog's sound setter so that it overrides pet's sound setter and then calls the superclass to continue to use existing functionality, try doing the same thing with the cat's sound setter. Let's do a final overview of overriding. Overriding can be done with any inherited method. It can be done with setters, getters, or regular methods. Overriding doesn't have to call the superclass version of the method that it is overriding if it doesn't need any of the functionality, but it is often advantageous or even necessary to call the superclass's method. To call the superclass's method, just use superclass.methodName followed by parentheses if it's a method. If it's a setter, just call the superclass.methodName. Thanks for joining us today for another ClassyJS devlog. As always, please subscribe, give a thumbs up, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below.